Good evening, Artificial Hearts family. We are back at it again, and we have a very special guest, straight from Washington, D.C., ambassador to the UN, um, multiple experience with public affairs and multiple languages that he speaks. We're really happy to have Dr. Ganoune Diop with us. Welcome on the platform, Dr. Diop. We just want to say thank you for your time and for being willing to be with us here tonight.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It is my pleasure.
It's a pleasure. Yeah, we're very honored. Dr. Diop, for those of you who might not be familiar with him, has extensive experience both as a Bible scholar and most recently in the past decade, working with international human rights and the defense of religious liberty for all. Dr. Diop, I also wanted to maybe hear a little bit from you, maybe in your own words, to tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing currently, where you are, and maybe something that you're really fond of in your work.
Well, I am currently the director of the Department of Public Affairs and Religious Liberty, the world headquarters of the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, and also Secretary General of International Religious Liberty Association. And actually, just incidentally, I just come back from Arusha, Tanzania, because I was encouraging, there is a new association in Africa, which is called All Africa Religious Liberty Association.
Wow.
And they were having a congress basically with guests and even the prime minister and many people from different countries in Africa coming, and even guests from the United States also. So, and it was a very good congress on freedom of conscience, basically. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. And could you just maybe just briefly explain a little bit to our audience? We have viewers who are from very different confessional backgrounds and none. We have a very young, like a relatively young audience. Tell us a little bit about what is the Department of Public Affairs and Religious Liberty, and what does it do? What is its purpose? And why is it titled Religious Liberty and Public Affairs?
Yeah. Well, public affairs may be one of the comparisons that I use often is to say that public affairs is the equivalent of the State Department or Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Basically, every country has a Ministry of Foreign Affairs to mediate the needs and to mediate the needs of the country towards other countries. So in 1901, the Seventh-day Adventist Church decided to create this department. So it exists for a long time now, in order to engage the public. So this is why it is called public affairs, you know. So basically, the goal of the department is to make known the Seventh-day Adventist Church, you know. So basically, make a case basically that Seventh-day Adventist Church is actually an asset to society, and I would even say a blessing, because you know, from a theological perspective, we have to understand that one of the overarching purpose of God is to bless the whole world. Actually, one of the first things that was announced in the book of Genesis right after creation, the text say God bless them and God tell them. So the blessing of God is really primordial, basically. And the same thing, when God chose Abraham, God told him explicitly, I will bless you. And then he mentioned that all the families of the earth shall be blessed through you and through your descendants. So in other words, when God chooses a person or a people, it is for the purpose of blessing the whole human family, basically, the whole human race. So, and I think this is also what is behind the motivation, the mandate of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, since when God, choose a people or a person, it is for the purpose of blessing other people. So the same thing. Now, I was going to say the same thing for the Seventh-day Adventist Church. It has been also chosen to be a vehicle, a blessing. And incidentally, this is really the reason why the Seventh-day Adventist Church has a huge portfolio of services, like health, education, humanitarian, human rights, and we're going to come back to that. So you can see, it's essentially the goal is to be a blessing to the world. Now, for our topic today, let me just right away mention that this is not just for Seventh-day Adventists. As a matter of fact, the international community, right, and I must say that very clearly, the international community rallied in order to basically promote, right, to adopt human rights. So it is not just by chance. We are not the only one promoting this. And maybe I should just very briefly mention to you, for example, that they are instruments voted at the UN. For example, the International Covenant on the Elimination of All forms of racial discrimination, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, and you have also the all kinds of convention. And of course, I can mention the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, right? And Article 18, for example, about religious liberty. So clearly there is an international consensus about the importance of religious liberty, or also called religious freedom or freedom of conscience, depending on which aspect one wants to emphasize, basically. Now, let me also specify in the Seventh-day Adventist context, there is something special about religious liberty, so much so that when the Department of Public Affairs was established, then the pioneers felt the need to add the religious liberty, because this was a value that they cherish. Now, let me maybe briefly mention the historical context. In 1888, Senator Blair from New Hampshire presented two bills to the Congress. Two bills. Now, the one was to make Sunday a mandatory day of rest for all Americans, right? So that was the first bill. The second bill was to make America into a Christian nation. Now, and very quickly, the Seventh-day Adventist pioneers actually objected to that, because if a day is imposed, then of course there will be no freedom. And if America became officially a Christian nation, then that opens the door for discrimination of minorities and so forth. So the Seventh-day Adventists valued freedom. Interestingly, maybe I should mention also that the first General Conference president of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, his name was John Byington. As a matter of fact, he participated personally in the in the underground,
Railroad?
way,
Underground road, railroad.
railroad, and and this is of course for the liberation of slaves who wanted to flee. So, and freedom was important right at the inception of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So even though they were defending religious freedom, they adopted also that all the freedoms are important. As a matter of fact, it is only in 1993, right, at the Vienna, this is called the Vienna Declaration, 1998, and it literally says all human rights are interrelated, interdependent, and indivisible, right? But that is also true for all freedoms, right? You cannot just defend freedom of conscience while, enslaving people. It doesn't make sense. So, early Adventist pioneers have a comprehensive understanding of freedom. But now maybe I should.
Before we get to the next blog, Dr. Diop,
Yes.
I wanted to ask you, and well, first of all, thank you for giving us that big picture understanding of religious freedom, why it matters, and in the Adventist Church. And I want us to delve a little bit deeper into that. But
Sure.
before we get there, I think a lot of our followers, a lot of the people that are watching us or going to watch this, they're very curious of how did you become a religious liberty advocate. I know you have a vast multicultural experience. You studied in Paris, you studied in the U.S. You're originally from Senegal. How did this multicultural experience shape your current work as a leader for a worldwide church in the
Okay.
area of human rights and religious freedom?
First of all, I grew up in a multicultural setting. Like my neighbors on the left side of our house are from Lebanon, Muslims. And on the right side, there were some French, for example, Catholic French. So very early and going to school, I mingled with people from various ethnicity and religion. So and I think that prepared me somewhat to be able, to be a cross-cultural person, basically, right? So however, it was when I went to France, and I was actually initially I wanted to study sociology, right? But when I came to France, my priority, because of the time of the year, was to go to the Conservatory of Music, actually. And at the Conservatory of Music, because I was dreaming of learning music as as a professional, basically. And I was playing the flute.
Wow.
So yes, and at the conservatory, my flute teacher is a Seventh-day, was a Seventh-day Adventist, is a Seventh-day Adventist, right? And one day he was bold, really, to just look at me and tell me, Ganoune, the day you will know Christ, you will be free. So notice the first thematic, right, that impressed me was about freedom, right? Because deep in me,
excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt you, but just to phrase it, so your first interaction with the Seventh-day Adventist was freedom. That was like
yes,
wow.
exactly, was freedom. So now, basically, after 40 years, something like that, it's like a full circle. So anyway, it was maybe about 12 years ago. I was invited to represent the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Edinburgh, Scotland, because they were basically commemorating the 1910 conference. And at that time, the Seventh-day Adventist Church had a representative, John Dibdall. But John Dibdall, that representative of the church, was asked to basically be the main editor of Andrew's Study Bible, right? So then the General Conference president asked me if I would replace him in representing the church at Edinburgh, Scotland. So I went there. At the beginning, things, I was, just learning, how to mingle with the people. And one day they asked me to share a meditation with the group of the organizers. So I did, and from that moment, they asked me many more things, so much so, just to make a long story short, at the end, they asked me to welcome all the delegates, and to introduce also the organizers. So basically, God opened a door for me, so people were basically very impressed, and they asked me to actually to be the moderator of the session on on uh, uh, mission to non-Christian religions.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and anyway, when I came back from that, then the director of PAL, seeing what has happened,
Was it
immediately,
John Gross?
yes, it
He's
was,
been here. Yeah, he was here on the
yes,
platform.
and immediately he asked the General Conference president that I should join PAL because of the gifts that God has given me, in introducing the church, the Adventist church, to other people, and in presenting the Bible, because probably that was my greatest center of interest, explaining the Bible to people, even to especially to non-Adventists who have no clue about the Bible. So, in any event, he asked me to join the PAL department, and this is I started as associate director, and then the following General Conference session, they asked me to become the director. But maybe so that was just in a nutshell how I came to the department. And of course, also before that, I was the director of the Global Mission Study Centers. Now, the Global Mission Study Centers, there were 5 of them. Its goal, the goal of that department within Adventist Mission was to make known world religions, better understand who are the Buddhists, who are the Hindus, who are the Muslims, who are the Jews, and who are the secular postmodern. So each center had a director, and I was basically the equivalent of a general director of all the centers. But studying very closely and writing about it and teaching comparative religion also equipped me, right, to mingle with other people, to better understand, in order to better share the Adventist faith. Because once we understand how people think, and as some people would say, you have to scratch where it itches, basically. And we need to be relevant and make sense to people, not just come with our jargon and they don't understand what is that. We have to understand people. So in any event, that is how I came, right, to the PAL department. And since then, my first assignment was to represent the Seventh-day Adventist Church at the United Nations, right? So, and that also was another exposure to the international arena, right? I started basically studying every country of the world. What are the issues, the histories, the challenges, the successes, and so forth. And even, until today, I am learning about others in order to respectfully relate to all people, and not come with arrogance that we have everything, they have nothing, so this kind of thing. So, and that is part of religious freedom, by the way, the respect of other people's choices. Because if people are not free in their conscience, then it doesn't make sense. Actually, allow me to just specify right away.
Please.
Freedom of conscience, religious liberty, is an international provision that is clear because it is part of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Now, notice universal. So that was adopted, right, by most nations. So we can say that this is not something that only Christians or only, a group of people have adopted. No, it is a universal human right. So now, and I will develop more about that shortly. But when we talk, and of course, it is found in almost all national constitution. Interestingly, this is what is called in America the first freedom, because very, very early in the history of this country of America, came to the fore the importance of religious freedom, right? And then the separation of church and state.
Right.
And then religion could not be imposed, basically. So limitation of the reach of the government, because the people's conscience, right? The conscience is sovereign. Now, it is actually absolute. There is, in fact, in religious freedom, there is a distinction that is made between what is called a forum internum and a forum externum. So the forum internum, that's the conscience of the person, that is absolute. Nobody should force or like anyone to believe or not to believe. Now the forum externum is, for example, like a few years ago, um, you know many government ask people not to congregate. Now that is part of international law. For a health reason, security reason, and so forth, a government can ask people not to congregate, and this was the case during the COVID. So the forum internum, what to believe, what not to believe, that is absolute. Nobody can impose it, right? But restrictions could happen for health reasons, for example. Now,
How do you see the religious liberty in the US compared to other places in the world?
well, religious liberty, unfortunately, is not perfect anywhere, right? Not now in the US, people talk more about religious freedom as the first freedom, and that is uh, woven in the history of this country, the value of freedom, absolutely. But uh, when I will talk more about what religious liberty really is, religious liberty is not just my right to worship, uh, one day of a week. It is more profound, but usually people limit religious liberty to a privilege to worship, as I want, the day I want. That is part of it. But religious liberty is much deeper than that. As a matter of fact, religious liberty is based on, and this is like something that I shared last week when I was in Africa, telling people there are two theses that I want to submit to their consideration. One is religious liberty or freedom of conscience, actually, which is the ground of that, is constitutive to what it means to be human. In other words, if you take away freedom of conscience, you basically suppress people's humanity, because conscience is constitutive to what it means to be human, So that is one thing. And the second important aspect, conscience is like an inner sanctuary, right? It is a sacred inner sanctum, not to be violated. No human being should be the conscience of another human being, basically. Because if someone is forced to basically bend his or her conscience, that person loses basically many freedom of thought, freedom of choice, and other freedom as well, like assembly or association. And this is because religious liberty is also a compound freedom, meaning there are several freedom that are actually contained within religious liberty. So this is why religious liberty means also freedom of choice. It is a compound freedom, freedom of choice, freedom of thought, freedom of decision, and so forth. So this is important. So it is constitutive, as I was saying, to what it means to be a human being. A human being without a conscience actually is not responsible of anything. People are actually liable to be judged because of human conscience. If not, they will not be responsible, right? So every human being should have conscience, and this is also true in the religious sphere. Nobody should be forced or compelled to adopt a religion, and actually this is explicitly stated in Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Do you want me to read?
Yeah, for sure. If you have it with you, that's fine.
Yes, I can just
Yeah, and then I
take
have
it.
a question I wanted to ask you on that
Yeah.
point. But let's read that first.
Yes, let me just find it. Just now, maybe this from a religious perspective. Before I read, look here. This is a Christian writer, Ellen White, who writes the following. I quote: "No man is to think that he is the owner of the minds and capabilities of his brethren. He is not to think that others must submit to his dictation. He is liable to err, liable to make mistakes, as every man is. He is not to try to control matters according to his ideas." Again, let letting people free to choose. Now, notice, it is not God's purpose, she says, that any human being should yield his mind and will to the control of another. Again, freedom, right, of conscience, of choice, and so forth, becoming a passive instrument into his end. No one is to merge his individuality in that of another. Now, this is an Adventist thing, saying this kind of thing just to show how important it is, freedom of conscience. And I must also add to that a second biblical truth this time that goes with it, which is human beings are sacred. How can I say that? Like the Bible and the Apostle Paul very clearly say, your bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit. So humans are temples like they are more sacred than cathedrals, more sacred than churches, mosques, pagodas, shrines, or you name it, right? And this is because human beings are indwelt by the Holy Spirit. And this is why the conscience is like the inner sanctuary where only God should have access. It should not be controlled by anyone. So you can see it's deeper than just, okay, uh, uh, a privilege or a prerogative, to have one day, like here in America, the freedom for the Sabbath or Sunday or something like that. No, it is deeper. It is one because human beings, like freedom of conscience, is constitutive to what it means to be human. And second, human beings are sacred and they ought to be respected. And by the way, this is the reason why also religious liberty goes much deeper. It becomes a lifestyle. If I believe, if I adopt genuinely religious liberty, then I start to respect people, give them space, right, to be themselves, not uh, imposing upon themselves. You see, there is an existential dimension to this, which is extremely important. You see, so this is why some people approach religious liberty very superficially. Okay, well, this is for my right to do this. No, no, religious liberty is part of what it means to be human. To in the first place. That's why it ought to be protected. And human beings, and this is really important. Human beings ought not to be violated, right? Because they are sacred. We don't go to violate temples, holy sites, right? We don't do that. We actually take care of them. So all the more should we take care and respect every person that we meet. So religious liberty is more than many people think, unfortunately.
Thank you so much, Dr. Diop, for that exposition. And now I want to ask you, I think we talked a lot about the substance of religious freedom. And now I want to talk about what religious freedom is not. But before we talk about that, Artificial Hearts podcast is brought to you by Artificial Hearts LLC, a podcast designed to humanize the hearts and warm the hearts that have become cold through secular humanism. If you like our content, if you want to continue to see some amazing material from our speakers like Dr. Diop here on the platform, please don't forget to like and subscribe on our YouTube channel and also get your complimentary mug. We'll be sending you one of our mugs, Dr. Diop, as a token of our appreciation for your for visiting us here on the podcast. So, Dr. Diop, I think we established a lot of like what religious freedom is. It's a fundamental human right. It's not merely a privilege. It's not merely an individual right, but it's a lifestyle. It's something that encompasses the whole human being. I think a lot of people, both those who are skeptical of religious freedom, especially whether they're on the right, on the political right, or on the political left, they see religious liberty as almost a liability. So I wanted you to maybe tell us a little bit, how is religious freedom different from cultural pluralism or philosophical pluralism or from ecumenism? So how is it different from a sort of value pluralism?
Yeah. Well, again, and I think I have hinted to that religious liberty doesn't mean irresponsibility. As a matter of fact, if a person embraces religious liberty, the person embrace also humanity, and show solidarity to others. So this is not divisive at all. Yes, people have the right to choose what to believe and what not to believe. That is what it means to be human. I mean, even God gives us freedom of choice, right? If you are willing, God says, like enter my covenant. He's not, if anyone wants to come after me, said Jesus. So this is not forcing people, because a covenant is basically based on love, and love cannot be forced. Nobody can come to another person, you have to love me. No, it doesn't work this way. It has to be a choice. So it is important, therefore, to remember that religious liberty becomes then a lifestyle at the same time of respect of others, of even circumspection before the mystery of others, because precisely because of conscience, this is so intimate, like it is in the inner being. Nobody has access to somebody else's conscience, right? uh, only God, so this is why we cannot force people. We can pray that people change for the better, but now the the problem is that human beings instrumentalize any good thing, and religious liberty is also, unfortunately, sometimes used as a weapon, to dominate people, or even like an instrument for a nation's foreign policy, trying to. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong in promoting religious liberty, but if it is used to impose, right, one's philosophy to others, then it is not, it is no longer religious liberty, you know.
It's like a form of
In
manipulation, right?
Yes, and it becomes an instrument of coercion. Remember, if human beings are sacred, and that only when they make a choice that they decide willfully, can that choice be relevant, so we cannot impose on people. Now, it is unfortunate that some people use religious freedom as an instrument to dominate other people, and that is totally wrong, because God, I mean, even Jesus, at some point told his disciples to choose. Like when people went away from him, he turns to his disciple and say, "You too, don't you want to go?" And of course, Peter say, "You have the words of eternal life." So uh, even God doesn't force people to go, because love cannot be forced, and God is love, basically. So there is more to religious freedom. Now, there is another aspect that I have not mentioned yet about the foundations for religious freedom, which is human dignity. Now,
Yeah,
this is
let's talk
important.
about that.
Yes, human dignity is the foundation for freedom of conscience, because humans, and of course, for talking from a Christian perspective, we can say human actually are created in God's image, you know, and part of God's image is actually freedom. As a matter of fact, only God is absolutely free, not dependent on anything. But regardless, he still create freedom for love to be possible. So religious freedom again finds its source not in the Enlightenment alone, not during the Reformation, but in God. As a matter of fact, allow me to say, God revealed God's self to Moses as Yahweh, right? He told Moses, Asher, here, Asher, I am who I am, I will be who I will be. Basically, God is telling Moses, you cannot confine me. I am, I am present. I am, God covers past, present, and future. No human being can say that. So this is why the name of God in the book of Revelation is the one who was, who is, and who is to come. The totally free one, dependent on anything. Whereas human beings, us, we are dependent on air, on food, on a lot of things, in order to continue to live. So again, human dignity is something that is foundational. And there is, now this is difficult for many human beings to accept, but there is no degree in dignity. In other words, a newborn baby has as much dignity as an elderly person, because this is why we respect every human being, well, based on human dignity. And because we are God's creatures and we are children of God, and there is nothing that is more profound than to say, well, that we are children of God, so because and this is, so then you see, when we talk about religious liberty, there are really several dimensions, and maybe if you want me to, I can just briefly,
Yeah, please go ahead.
I can briefly, like enumerate the various aspects of this, because I mean, as I was saying earlier, let me just open that here to share that. When we talk about religious freedom, it's let me just 1 second here. Okay. This is one of the most profound truths of our human nature, religious freedom. Okay, so let me just mention few of those. First of all, religious liberty is a political principle. I mean, no question. At a most basic level, freedom of thought, of conscience, religion, or belief undergirds the political principles such as the consent of the governed, limited government, rule of law, even democracy, right? If people do not choose, if people cannot vote, for example, a representative government. So it is a political principle, yes, but second, it is also a legal provision in international law. And I mentioned it is enshrined in the UDHR, the European Union, the African Union agencies, the Organization of American States, and in national constitutions, right? But it is also a public good. It is part of the social contract to live in community. I should allow people to use their freedom of conscience, freedom of choice, right, to make their own decision. And I mentioned earlier also, it is a compound freedom because it presupposes freedom of thought, conscience, belief, and conviction. And as I was saying, all freedom are related. So religious liberty, it is also a human right. Now, when we talk about human right, usually we emphasize the right aspect, the legal aspect, but the human aspect is as important. So this is why I will say religious liberty is a sign of our humanity, and as such, it should also lead to becoming a symbol of our interconnectedness as human being. And this is basically like a solidarity that we should show one another, all human beings, based on the fact that we have human conscience. And it is also a religious liberty is a call to tolerance, right? We don't have to share people's thought to allow them to express them, so they have the right to their opinions, basically. So we have to show solidarity. If I want people to listen to what I have to say, then I also owe them the same courtesy, basically, right? So also, religious liberty is a seal of sacredness, and that's what I mentioned earlier. You see, so there are several dimensions, and I just mentioned number 10, I will say, religious liberty is a moral imperative. right? This we all people. It is an expression of the immeasurable value of every human being. And of course, uh, one of the most important aspects of religious liberty is that it is a spiritual endowment, a God-given prerogative. This is not a government just extending, tolerance or courtesy. No, it is based on God who gave, so this is really the the reason why very early Seventh-day Adventists understood that defending this freedom is participating in the restoration of the image of God in human. So it is really profound. So yeah,
Well, thank you so
that
much, Dr. Diop, for that very, I think, clear and concise exposition on the value and the significance of religious liberty. And I think now we're already getting to the final block of our program. And I think I really wanted to ask, what can we do, right? And how can how can we judiciously discuss religious freedom
well,
without falling into the pitfalls of the extremes? Sorry about that.
yeah,
I
yeah.
choked a little
No,
bit
no,
here.
no, no worries. You know, again, uh, I think we have to start with the basic, the decision to respect other people, you know, their full humanity, because respecting people's full humanity is to give them access to freedom of thought, of conscience, of freedom of expression, right? And this is just like a, a humble attitude to have before people, because human beings are mysteries. Why? Because we are created in the image of God, and we cannot confine God. So we cannot confine human beings to biological data. There is something in us sacred, and religious liberty is a sign of that sacredness. And religious liberty really can help to the restoration of the dignity of human beings. And but again, we cannot use this as a weapon, because, as a matter of fact, someone who genuinely embraces religious liberty renounces violence. This is really important, because violence actually basically desecrate human beings. Human beings have to keep their integrity, physical integrity, mental integrity, emotional integrity, social integrity, spiritual integrity. No part of that should be violated. And religious liberty is a reminder, right, that, hey, respect other people, give them the right to decide, to the right to choose according to the dictates of their conscience. So it's more profound. And I must say that most of the exposition that I hear on religious liberty are often, and I'm saying this humbly, often superficial, because people just highlight, okay, the benefit one can have through this liberty. But it's more than just, it defines our humanity. It helps also respect people. You know, Let me give you something that maybe, if you, no person can be racist if that person embraces religious liberty, for example. Why? Because you will
Amen.
respect you will respect the dignity of difference, right? So, and the dignity, I mean, even if I disagree with the person, it's not a reason to confine that person, like into a box or something, like, or to try to harass. And so, in that sense, religious liberty is a renunciation to harm people, to hurt people. Also, it is. it can open a space for living, for coexisting in peace, precisely, you know. So, and these are just few aspects. I could expand more, but I think for a podcast that would be
No, that
fine.
was good. Yeah, do we have time for just one final question, Dr. Diop? I know you've been very generous for your
Please,
time, but I think we can
please.
conclude with this one just to, I think there's been so many good points that were made in this time that we've had here. And I just wanted to maybe hone in like a final message for our for the folks that are following us on YouTube, that are gonna see
Mhm,
more of our content on Instagram. Don't forget to like and subscribe. But for our
mhm.
final question, Artificial Hearts is a podcast dedicated to humanizing the hearts that have become cold through secular humanism by disseminating the works of Dostoevsky to a popular audience and reinvigorating and restoring Western culture with the timeless truths and values of the Christian gospel. So, Dr. Diop, you know more than I do that today we're living in a society, especially in the northern hemisphere, in the U.S. and in Europe, where we're seeing a rise in political extreme and nihilistic ideologies from all spectrums. How do you see the value of religious freedom embodied in the Seventh-day Adventist Church as humanizing the hearts that have become cold by these extremist ideologies? And how can we preach this message of religious freedom? How can it transform the lives of those who have given up on love and on on this transforming message of religious freedom?
Yeah, um, uh, to that question, I will just see a broader picture. I think in nowadays we need a new renaissance, a new enlightenment, and it will help greatly if religious liberty is adopted. It can be a tool to to make us more human and humane, you know, to I mean, again, tolerance is not the best word, but acceptance of the the difference of people and
Love,
embracing a human. I'm
love,
sorry.
love,
Of course, love. I mean, uh, the goal of freedom is love. So therefore, the goal of religious freedom is love also. And I am saying this, thinking about the biblical passage of Galatians 5, where the Apostle Paul say, "It is for freedom that Christ has set you free," right? And then in that same passage, he mentioned that the whole law, right, is summarized in "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." And it is on that same chapter 5 of Galatians that comes the fruit of the Holy Spirit, right? And the first fruit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, So, and the nine fruit basically faithfulness and
self-control.
temperance,
Yeah, temperance.
yeah, or self-control, Again, all these are relational virtues, relational values, love, patience. I mean, so again, that leads us to really one of the core values of Christianity, you know, and the Apostle Paul summarizes there are three things: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest is love. So the goal of freedom is love also. And I think this is why those who embrace religious liberty should accompany it with the prayer to God to pour out the love of God, and this is what the Holy Spirit does. It is not natural in a human being, but God pours through His Spirit His love to human heart, because human beings, you know, uh, becomes very soon expert in criticizing, in demonizing others, in accusing others, but the Spirit of God builds other people and pray for other people and love other people, you know. So this is why Jesus' teaching in the Sermon on the Mount is that you have heard, you shall hate your enemy, but I say love your enemy, anyway. But religious liberty is really an instrument to help us on our journey, to become human and humane. This is why I say we need that renaissance, that deep reformation, and that is, if we embrace God, then we reflect God's character, and God's character is love, basically. Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much, Dr. Diop. And I think on that note, thank you all for watching Artificial Hearts.